5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
You're listening to Working Forward, presented by Symetra. In this limited podcast series, hosted by Todd Zen, we explore the future of work from a variety of viewpoints and discuss the challenges and opportunities ahead.
Hello, and welcome to the Working Forward podcast. I'm Todd Zen, your host, and thanks for joining us as we continue to talk about the future of work, and in our season 2, give it a special employee benefits flavor. I have really been looking forward to recording this episode because we have the great pleasure of welcoming back an old friend. So before I do that, though, just a little bit about our topic. So we're going to be talking about technology and the InsurTech sphere specifically. We haven't had very many episodes in this journey that hasn't talked about technology in some context or in some way. And we know that technology is going to continue to transform the future of work. It's certainly absolutely transforming employee benefits. So with that being our general topic, I can't think of a better guest to welcome in and our former host, in fact, Laura Dinan Habor. So Laura, I don't know if I should say welcome to the show because you've been a part of it. Maybe welcome to the guest chair. But anyway, welcome. We are thrilled to have you.
I'm so excited to be here, Todd. I think it's been a long time coming, and very rarely do I actually get to sit in the guest chair. It's usually in the chair of host or chair of producer on the back end. So I'm excited to take this seat today, figuratively and literally, and mix things up a bit in a positive, impactful way.
I think it's going to be fun. So, let's try out the guest chair, and I'll hit you with the first question. Our audience got to know you last year, and we always introduced you and maybe gave your title, talked a little bit about who you worked for. But I'd love to give you a chance to expand on that a bit. Talk a little bit about kind of what you do, what your day-to-day looks like, what your goals are. I know that you are on the front lines of shaping InsurTech here in the Hartford, Connecticut area, but tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So Innovation Brand Director is the title that I currently hold. And I've been with Nassau Financial Group for close to 6 years now. So it's been a fast 6, but there's been a lot of evolution that's taken place within there. When I joined the company, initially it was to run the incubator program called Nassau Reimagine. So we've talked about it briefly in previous seasons, but really it was an opportunity here within the Hartford area to take advantage of all the great work that was going on. So there were accelerator programs that were located downtown. We had startups and scale-ups from across the world and locally here, feet on the street, kind of bringing their innovation, bringing their talent to Connecticut. So what happened when they went through the accelerator programs, generally 90 days, ta-da, Nassau Reimagine. So I like to think of us as day 91. So at that point in time, we would welcome in a vetted group of startups and scale-ups who were not only, some of which were strategic to our business, some of which were just doing great work in the community. And we helped them create deeper connections, whether that was at carriers, whether it was with the talent sphere, with the great educational institutions around us, or if it was within, setting up office space and bringing their business truly to Hartford and to Connecticut. So it was a mix of strategy, I would say, learning from these great individuals, these quick thinking minds, bringing that mindset into a traditional industry such as insurance was very educational for both sides, I believe. And also, too, looking to see from an economic development play, what could we do to help not only bring more individuals to the city, to the state, but also give our talent here an opportunity to engage in a different way? So that is the work that we were doing back in 2019 when the incubator program kicked off. Like many things, right? Things evolved through the pandemic. We took our programming online at that point, and we really dove into community building. And Todd, like we've seen in past episodes and in past seasons, when you build a community around an idea or build a community around a technology, a belief, you get like-minded folks and sometimes not like-minded folks. And there's great value in that coming together around a conversation. So we dove deep into what we call retire tech. And we worked to actually trademark that term, and we created the RetireTech map. We've had RetireTech forums. So we shifted our focus from being an in-person incubator program to being an online opportunity for community building through conversation, through thought leadership, and through strategy. So that's really kind of where our evolution is. And, I'm excited to say that when this podcast airs, we will have a new piece of news out in the community where we are actually bringing to market a fund where we're going to be, yes, big eyebrows, woohoo, where we're going to be investing in startups and scale ups. So that's a new and exciting piece that I did not give you a heads up on, but it's something that we're doing to kind of grow our program and kind of elongate what it means for NASA to have Reimagine and be an innovation steward, not only inside of our own two walls, but also within the community around us, locally and globally.
Wow. Well, first of all, congratulations. That is super exciting. And, just as somebody who grew up in this area, and Hartford has been long considered the insurance capital of the country. And, think about all the legacy carriers here and the work you're doing to marry that kind of foundational community, that deep-seated insurance DNA that Hartford has with this technology and this growth and this youth. It just seems to me like a perfect marriage. And I know Symetra's enjoyed our partnership as well, both on the retirement side. You mentioned RetireTech. Of course, Symetra's in the retirement business, and from an employee benefits context, which is, my purview and something that's been a lot of fun to explore via this podcast and other means. So let me just hit you right off the bat with a question, a selfish question, I guess. So you've been on this InsurTech journey for a while. I'm interested in what you've seen from the employee benefit space. Is there anything interesting happening out there, maybe that is particular to employee benefits that you've seen? I know we're sort of a niche space in the business, but we've got a lot of large employee benefit carriers in the Hartford area. And, I'm interested in whether or not you've seen an evolution as well. This may have not been the first area that technology kind of set about to innovate, but, as InsurTech has evolved, I'm just interested in what you've seen from an employee benefits standpoint.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in that some folks might be like InsurTech, employee benefits, where is the bridge that crosses both of those islands? But I think they're very much in some ways connected, especially depending on what the InsurTech is doing. I think it's important to understand the definition of employee benefits, and there's many, right? But for my answer to this question, I'll focus in on the, employee benefits can be perks, compensation provided by employers to employees in addition to their base salary. So I'm reading from a definition here that I found on the internet, like health insurance, retirement plans, paid time off. They can attract, retain top talent, increase employee satisfaction, improve overall productivity. So what's interesting to me is when I look at InsurTechs and the value that they're bringing, I think there's a massive opportunity for us to look at them through an interesting lens and a different lens. I think there's something to be said around the upcoming generation and what they value, right? I can only speak for myself here as a millennial, but I think it's safe to say that Gen Z and beyond, there's larger and louder conversations around employee satisfaction, around customer experience, around serving those who sought to be served in ways that they want to be met, where they want to be met. Startups are working to do that, right? They're working to do it on the customer experience side. They're looking to do it on how people interact with data on the web, how they, when they show up at Symetra's site, how are we working to get them the best experience possible? And there's, behind the scenes, startups and scale-ups across the world doing interesting things. You could also take it through the view and the lens of the employee health side, right? So health insurance, for example, I was in London about 6 weeks ago and I met an interesting startup. And similar to the reproductive health startup that we had on, I believe that was season 1, they are doing interesting work in that space as well. So not only is it helping individuals, but they're focusing on the employer as an employee benefit ad to say, bring us into your sphere. Help us provide people with support they need if they need it. Help us get them through their journey, and then they can use it as part of not only a support system or an employee attraction element, but then also a retention element too. So I think it's through the lens of many. And there's examples of all different facets out there. But for me, something that I've noticed is the more strategic use of startups, of technology to serve not only employees, but upcoming talent base with solutions that they're looking for. And I think we have an opportunity as employers to really look and start conversing around what have we not considered? What is something that could be so simple that's right in front of us where we could offer it potentially as an employee benefit? And again, I use the word simple loosely because understanding that there's a lot of complexity behind it. But there are opportunities, I think, to meet people where they're looking to be met with technology, with talent, in ways that may have seemed too close to even see in front of their self. But those are some light examples, but really wanted to paint the picture that it's not necessarily in one avenue or another. It's a broad-based opportunity, I think, for all of us to sit and say, if I'm a startup, how can I appeal to an employer? How can I use what I'm doing through an employee benefits lens? Because not only would it help the potential employer, but it could help retain and attract employees. So it's almost like a double sell to the employer in that case. So I really challenge people to rethink, what does it mean? Are you appealing to the employee benefits side to individuals and companies like Symetra who are in this space? Have you thought about that as a potential angle? I know, Todd, I provided you an introduction to an individual doing interesting things, and they had never even considered themselves through the employee benefits angle before. So it's like, I think just waking up that inner animal to say, like, have you considered it? And if you haven't, why not? And let me introduce you to Todd.
That's such a great answer. And I think you hit on a lot of the key themes here. I think employee benefits are a great way to reach people. And it's something that you can reach a lot of people quickly as well, right? So if you've got a solution and you can distribute it through the employee benefit channel, if you make a sale to an employer, you can have access to thousands of employees that are then utilizing your service instead of maybe adding the user one by one. I also think this idea of thinking about that value to the employer, right? So what do employers think about? You hit on a lot of them in your answer, almost all of them, right? So retention, satisfaction, productivity, acquisition, recruiting, things like that. So anything that can make an employer's benefit offering stronger and appeal to their employees is of tremendous value. And then I think you also have this angle of anything that makes the population healthier is very attractive to employers, because we know that their health insurance spend is one of the biggest line items in their budget now. So it feels like there's a lot of InsurTechs looking to approach these things, including the gentleman you connected me with. And I really enjoyed the conversation because you could sort of see the light bulb go off of like, hey, I've built this really cool thing, and hey, maybe I have a chance to get it in the hands of a lot of people and provide value to employers and employees. So I think it's a great example of kind of connection point. Let me build on this a little bit though with maybe a more specific follow-up question. One thing that we are focused on a lot in employee benefits, I know it's Metro, but I think as an industry as a whole, is trying to deliver more personalized experiences or products or recommendations. And one of the things that maybe it's a double-edged sword, we are great at reaching people. We work with employers and design benefit packages and programs that are then rolled out to broad populations of people. But sometimes it can be hard to then personalize that experience, right? Some of these things are optional and maybe they cost in like a voluntary plan where an employee has to pay for it. And what a perfect state for us would be to then be able to personalize, whether it's an experience or whether it's a product, or really try to understand people and give them what they need specifically. So I think technology is great at this. I've seen a lot of really interesting tools, a lot of nascent technologies that can understand profiles about people, maybe certain elements of whether it's a financial or personal matter, and then transition that into sort of actionable insights. So I have to think there's a lot of InsurTechs out there approaching this problem/opportunity. And anything you've seen of note there?
Yeah, and it's a good point, right? I mean, that's definitely one of the trends that we're seeing, and especially it's probably going to be one of the strongest impacts in the next few years in particularly, right? So hyper personalization and the conversation and just broadening it out a little bit more around the use of, some folks are able to or not able to, but like leveraging AI, for example, to tailor products, to tailor customer experience. As you talked about, things are optional I think a lot of it, as it come down to it, is education around these things. So what are we doing to educate, to help individuals make decisions, to then be able to hyper personalize, to then be able to collect the data, and then use that data to help them make the next decision or help them empower themselves to make sure they have the correct data to then, go down that decision funnel as you would. So that's something that we're seeing a lot of, and it's not only new technologies or new companies coming to market, but it's also some of the companies that we've been working with for a while or we've had relationships with for quite some years. People are starting to reevaluate, right? As data becomes and is one of the highest forms of currency in the work that we do, people are looking back to say at their systems and their programs, how can we hyper personalize, not only for our own good, but also for the goods of those that we're looking and seeking to serve. And through that data, we're able to learn a lot more. I think it's making everyone smarter. Granted, there's obviously secure systems around said data, but wouldn't it be amazing to have a world in which we could trade or provide data points across the spectrum, non-personalized, so it's safe, right? Where no one's breaking any rules, or at least large trend sets to help inform these decisions. So if Todd, you're sitting in the employee benefits space, but I have some really powerful insights based on this hyper personalization through tools that we're using to then share over to you to help impact the work that you're doing, I think would be a really amazing thing for us to get to down the road. And, I'll say that some of this work does go on through relationships like we have, right? Partnerships and trust and being able to build and commingle. But we are seeing a lot of that go on in the market, the hyper personalization. What does it mean to slow down, to collect more data, to use strategy around said data to make decision-making patterns either easier or better inform the consumers, right? Better inform them, better arm them to make said decisions. I think it's the quickest place to see that, I think, is really in the P&C side. There's a lot of really interesting technology over there that is, I'll say, obvious, it's tangible, where it may be less tangible on, say, like the retirement side, where it's back end opportunities, people building really interesting and intelligent systems, whether it's quoting tools, whether it's on the distribution side. We're seeing pieces of it. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for consumers to understand that that's what's happening. They'll experience, a more powerful journey, but they may not understand or be able to touch that journey in the same way that they could on the P&C side of things.
That's great. So I'd like to maybe take us out of employee benefits and go back to that macro and InsurTech piece again. And I'm interested in your perspective. You're obviously so close to this progression of these InsurTechs, and I love the terminology you use, by the way, the incubator, feel so supported in an incubator, and then you go to the accelerator. And it's such an interesting sphere to me. But what are some of the challenges, just at a high level, regardless P&C, retirement benefits? What are some of the key challenges these InsurTechs face as they go through that evolution that I just mentioned and potentially grow from there and become successful? What are the biggest challenges on the journey?
I think some of the biggest challenges that we have either seen, been part of the experience, et cetera, and you hear a lot about at different conferences and speaking with founders, is really the understanding at the speed at which insurance operates. You will find smaller, more niche, larger appetite for innovation groups that are, quicker to move. I think as a whole, it's safe to say that our industry is steady. I won't call us slow, I'll call us steady. So the speed at which, a startup or a scale up is used to operating and the speed at which a carrier operates can be very different. And the structure in each carrier is different. The decision-making tree can be different. I think it's getting the individuals to understand that walking in the door, holding one meeting is not generally what's going to sell the solution. It's going to be really that relationship building, having that key driving force within the organization and having that person help take the megaphone and sing your song as loud as possible. I think you're going to have at least one or two people at a minimum need to be behind you through your journey, especially when things take a while or go a little bit slower than what you may anticipate. It's important to know that as long as you have that support and continue to foster that relationship, you're more apt to find success. And again, speed is not in relation to how effective or ineffective your solution is. Speed is which, it comes down to availability. People are juggling a lot of things. Sometimes innovation is not the first thing on the list that they have to juggle. So it's really being able to come in quick with information around, what benefits are you bringing to the company or organization or individual? What are you going to do for them in terms of either, are you optimizing? Are you time saving? Are you in the employee benefits space? What benefits are you offering? What positive things are you bringing to the table? Be clear about that. Be clear about, aligning yourself to what you perceive the goals of the individual organization to be, and coming with that information and start with it. Because if you can get the ear of the individual to say, wow, this person is either going to help me save time, they're going to help me save money, they're going to help me increase my retention or my attraction, they're going to help me do the things in which are important to me, important to my business, important to my company, you have a very high chance of getting on a short list, and you're having that people, line up behind you with their megaphones to help sing your song. So I would say speed is one that we've seen as a blanket challenge across. I would say another one is being able to have people come in, like I just stated, come in with what your solution is and directly how it correlates to what you're looking to solve and what the value that the company can see. Those things are very important. And then also too, don't be afraid to continue asking questions, making introductions, go to these industry events, show up, shake hands, make connections via the app, reach out on LinkedIn. Please don't be salesy. I know that you're looking to sell, and trust me, I understand why, and there's power there. But the first time that you and I interact, or you interact with whomever, if you come in as a sales individual, you will likely be greeted with a different welcome than if you come in as a business professional looking to learn more about how your solution can help solve their problem. So I would think about how you structure, oneself in that area. Most people are absolutely fabulous and great, but I know that from experience, if you come in hot, you may scare some folks. So those are, I think, simple takeaways of challenges that we see, and opportunities for people to at least take it into consideration as they go out and sell themselves.
That's fantastic. And I have a follow-up question, and I think you already answered probably more than half of it, but maybe we could distill it down even further. You've obviously seen a lot on this journey. You've seen a lot of startups, I'm sure, succeed. I'm sure you've seen some that unfortunately didn't have the success they were looking for. Is there any key trait that you've noticed of the startups that do succeed? Is it about the product they build? Is it about their founder? Is it about any other key things? Like, do you have a sense for really what drives that success, or do you think it's actually disparate and very specific on the company's journey?
I think it can vary. Definitely, I think it can vary, right? So if I am company A and I have a problem, a very specific problem, and you can come in with that very specific solution, I'm going to be interested in you, right? I mean, if the relationship works and all the pieces of the puzzle are there, I'm going to be very interested in either partnering with you or absorbing you. So that's definitely a piece of it. I would say outside of the specificity, people really do matter. People matter because you can have a great individual with a wonderful idea that doesn't work out, but that individual is still great. So when they go on to idea number 2, 3, 5, 25, 35, you're still going to find organizations that are going to be willing to partner with you. So being a good human, being a great communicator, being somebody who takes the time to listen, those are very standard things that are not so standard. That I think if you can stand out as a person in that manner, as a startup, as a scale up, someone looking to come in and provide a solution, that will be very beneficial and very helpful for you. I would say, again, going back to my earlier comments, there's value in understanding what you're looking to get into. So when you go to provide your solution or pitch your solution or your technology or product yourself, align it as closely as you believe possible to perceived goals for that company or organization. So show up in the same way that you've done your homework, you've done your research, and be very clear about how you're going to help ease pain, reduce time spent, reduce money spent, increase productivity, whatever it is you're bringing to the table, be honest, be open, and be upfront with it, because that will truly help the organization, listen to you the first time and listen to you in a way where they may be able to envision you or your solution potentially coming in and as a partner. So those are some simple things. I would say the other element to it is be persistent. Be politely persistent, because you may send a note, you may set up a call, you may do all of these things, meet someone in person, but it may take 3 or 4 years. And you might be thinking, I don't have the runway for 3 or 4 years, and that's okay too. But understand that when you have a champion inside somewhere, to my earlier comment about having at least 2 champions, when leadership changes, when turnover happens, you don't want to lose your only person on the inside. So set up those relationships. And again, the more people who understand the work that you're doing, they may be able to provide you feedback to give you other applications for your solution. One example I'll give you is we partner with a startup who was in our incubator back in the early days of 2019. That solution has evolved based on feedback and based on our needs internally. So we're still partnering with them today, and they've evolved their solution to meet our needs. And that's worked for the relationship that we have. So it may take time, but be open and be willing to hear at least what the needs are, and pivot if it makes sense. If it doesn't, politely decline, but be open to pivoting, because you never know what doors may open through that as well.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it resonates with me because I'm actually, in my role at Symetra, often on the other side of this. So I'm the person that InsurTechs are pitching to or calling, asking for meetings to say, hey, we've got this solution, can Symetra use this? And I think the ones that do it best have the traits and take the approach that you just mentioned, right? Which is being very solution focused and trying to determine, how what they build can fit into our world and our ecosystem, persistent, but in a polite way, and, very, very focused on adding value. And, those are the ones that we've partnered with, we've had great success with. And so I think that makes a lot of sense to me. So 2 more questions before we wrap up. First one is, you are obviously very future focused on this podcast, and I'm curious for your take, think 5 years out, a decade out. Do you think we're going to continue on a similar path where organizations such as yours will, have this support model and be helping InsurTechs get to market? Do you see any other major transformative changes, any change in the role of the carrier? I guess I'm just interested in your macro level take on the sort of near future of InsurTech and where we may go from here.
Yeah, I think if I were to dream big on this, dream big dreams, as they say, I think it's going to do a few things. One thing that I would love to see, and I may have even mentioned this in a previous episode, is focusing on, for example, embedded insurance. It's around us, right? There's instances of it. You buy a BMW, you have the option to buy the insurance right there. Well, why can't we do that embedded structure across all things, right? If you take out any of the complexity and you take out any of the what ifs or that won't work because, or et cetera, it's like, well, if I buy a car, I get insurance. If I have a child in the hospital, why am I not offered the option to buy life insurance, to buy other forms of insurance? If I have a certain birthday, why am I not automatically, if I were to embed something, I would create a dashboard for humans, right? If I create a dashboard for myself, I want on one dashboard, I want all of my insurance. I want to be able to compare rates, right? Go to market right there. I want to have things offered to me based on triggers in the system. So not only is it, hey, Laura's selling her house, this is a trigger. Now we can pull this data. And from that data, we're going to be able to cross-sell her A, B, and C. I want all of it to be embedded. And I might be in the minority here. I think it might be a little data heavy for most folks. And they're saying, Big Brother, no. But why do we have to wait for these things, right? I would love them all just to come to me and have the choice at that point in time. So I would, elongate the trigger scales. I would add interesting and new pieces of the puzzle into it. And I would want to be, if I were someone selling these products, I would want the opportunity to be able to market throughout the entire customer journey, and the journey being like a human life cycle. I think that would be pretty cool and interesting. I don't know that we'll ever actually get there based on the challenges we have as a, just as a society, but then also as an industry. I think that might be a little too forward thinking for the hyper personalization, the hyper connectivity, the cross functioning of data. What we may find ourselves in is really kind of leading in on more of the personalization space. I don't know that I'll ever see a time where we're not going to have carriers support startups. I think that's an important piece of what makes this successful, at least in the insurance industry. I can't speak to other areas of business, but there's so much information and so much that we gain as carriers working with startups or even having conversations with startups to have, systems that are in many cases legacy systems questioned, right? So, hey, I'm a startup. I have a solution for this legacy system or something the legacy system is doing. Have you thought of A, B, and C? If I bring in my product, I can solve these key issues. Like, holy sugar, right? Like, wouldn't it be great to get more of those kinds of opportunities in the door as we're working through these systems? I think that will always be there, and I think it's an important part. I think in like looking out over the next 5 to 10 years, who knows? And I think the biggest piece of my answer to that is much of it is likely to stay the same, but some of it will likely continue to change at a very rapid pace. There was conversation in our last season around AI and the use of AI. There's some folks who sit on the side of the wall that says, well, it's been around since the 80s. It's not necessarily new. We're just using it in new and broader ways. There are other individuals who say, I'm never going to use it. I can't trust it. I'm afraid of it. And then there's, a larger subset who said, we're going to use it. We're going to figure out how to use it intelligently and safely, the best that we can to our abilities, which is constantly evolving. And I think that is the biggest transformation that we can't put our finger on, is we've seen it increase, time to market. We've seen it reduce time spent. We've seen it in productivity. We've seen it on the ops side, especially. I think there's areas that are going to continue to transform and change. We've all heard the saying now, right? AI is not going to replace humans. Humans who know AI is going to replace. Okay, fine. Yep, truth to that. But I just don't think we can get a true handle on the scale of which change will happen if we allow it to happen, right? So Todd, I guess flip question for you would be, from where you're sitting, what do you predict are some of the biggest changes or maybe non-changes in like the next 1 to 3 years?
Wow, you swapped it. You were the
Bada
guest,
boom.
and then you flipped the coin on me. I love it. I think that we are at a similar tipping point around AI that you just referenced, but I also agree with what you said about the fact that it's not an overnight change. It's not something that's going to radically change everything in an instant. It's a tool. It's a massively powerful tool, and I think we're all going to have to figure out how to use it best. It's no different than the internet or other big transformative changes. It was something that the internet came and everything changed, but certain companies took better advantage of the internet, right? I think certain companies will take better advantage of AI and a lot of the things you talked about, or even the product development example you gave, which hyper personalization, right? Building product, offering product based on your particular circumstance. I love that, but I worry about there's too much superfluous personalized marketing today, and I think that leads to distrust. So if you had that model that you talked about with your dashboard and you just had a child and we're offering you this, how do you trust it as a consumer that you really need it? Because right now we're all inundated with this type of personalized marketing that I think is pretty surface level, and I think it actually leads folks to say, I don't think I need that. I think you're just, kind of forcing this my way. So, to get back to your question, I think there's going to be a lot of change in the next 1 to 3 years. I think that, it is going to be in the employee benefit space, the companies that take advantage of the opportunities that things like AI present, but also do it in a way that doesn't lose focus on customer value, what customers want, how they want to be interacted with. We had an episode that we recorded just earlier this season that where we brought in our sales reps, the individuals that are out on the street selling our group benefits product, and they said everybody wants to talk about technology, technology, technology. But at the end of the day, nobody wants to remove the personal touch.
Right.
So it's also going to be about how do we use technology to delight people, but also don't make people feel like all of a sudden I only have a chatbot to talk to as well, right? And that's going to be a super fine line. I think some will do it better than others, and I think the winners will do it best.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I asked the question, right? Because we've talked a lot about tech, a lot about solution, a lot about InsurTech. At the heart of it, it's people, right? It's people. It's our minds. To your point, we buy with our hearts and our minds in some cases. And it comes down to, education. I think at the end of the day, like we as carriers, you as a startup, individuals, et cetera, the better we can educate and provide information, truth of source, in the work that we're doing, I think it's just going to only help the journey ahead, right? So we can speculate, what is 1 month, 1 year, 10 years going to look like? But Todd, to your point, and especially within the employee benefits space, it really does come back down to people. At the heart of it all, it's people. So I think, as long as people are creating and educating and getting the word out there with a pure heart, hopefully we'll just continue to have great solutions to help not only the InsurTech space, but specifically in the employee benefits arena as well.
I think that ties things together beautifully. So I would like to end there. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. I miss hosting this with you, but it is super fun to get you to come on as a guest, and your insights were fantastic. And I think we all got to know you better, which is fantastic. The work you do is really interesting and hugely impactful to all lines of insurance and the future. So Laura, thank you so much for joining us. For everyone else, for the audience, thank you as well for being on the journey with us. We have more exciting episodes coming your way, so keep an eye on your podcast feed. Subscribe if you haven't already. And with that, this is Todd Zen signing off the Working Forward podcast. Thanks for joining.
You're listening to Working Forward, Future of Work podcast series. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Symetra Life Insurance Company or its affiliates.